What is up, Aztec fans? In this video, we're going to be looking at the POE stat that I keep tweeting about. Get used to it because I'm going to be using it a whole lot this season. Without any further ado, let's get to it. What you are looking at right here is one of my POE sheets. This is the sheet from last season, the 2017-2018 season. I'm using this sheet because it has actual numbers in it, as opposed to the sheet that I have for this season, which is totally blank. Really quick, just to look at what we have. On the left side, you have all the teams that are in the conference, and then across the top, you have a couple of the different things. They all have little notes on them that will explain what they are, but I'll also explain them here. So first off, you have the team's record over the course of the season, and I'll just update that as I can. Next to that is the conference record. Those are pretty simple, and the reason I have those two on this sheet is just to be able to picture a little more easier how POE actually correlates with winning overall. Moving on to the actual data part of this sheet, POE stands for points over expectation. What POE does is it compares how many points a player scores with how many points they were expected to score given the amount and type of shots they took. The number it spits out is on a per game basis. Now for this sheet, it's looking at a team as a whole as opposed to an individual player. When the stat was developed, it was developed to look at individual players, but it works just as well with teams. And this is something else that I've gotten from Cranjis McBasketball. He actually created this stat, and he uses it to compare teams as well as individual players, and it works just as well for both of them. The number it spits out is a per game number. And so in this case, Nevada last season, the 2017-2018 season, scored almost 9.5 more points than an average team would have given the same amount of possessions and the same type of possessions. The way we get these numbers is through the use of Synergy stats. I'm not going to go into the Synergy website or anything right now. It's a cool resource. It does cost a little bit of money, but for my purposes, it's worth it. And I can, on the other sheets, show you exactly how these numbers are calculated. But for this is a per game number on this. And then I just color coded it so you can see a little bit better the best and the worst ones. Once again, you can see Nevada had the best POE, and they also had by far the best record. They also got the furthest in the tournament, and granted, San Diego State very easily could have moved on. It came down to literally the last shot, but that's neither here nor there. The category next to POE has a lowercase s POE. And what this is it measures the same exact thing, but over the course of the entire season. And so it's basically just this number, the POE number, multiplied by how many games. Actually, the way I get it is I find the SPOE first, and then I divide this number by how many games the team played to get the actual POE. These numbers are bigger and more spread apart, so it's a little easier to tell who's scoring well and who's defending well and things like that. But it is also more subject to variations in the amount of games a team plays. So, for example, San Jose State down here only played 30 games last year, whereas Nevada played 37. So even if they had the same exact POE, the SPOE would be different just based on the difference in the amount of games. So for that reason, POE is a little bit better to look at. But for me, I kind of like the SPOE more just because it's easier to determine what you're looking at, but overall POE is better. Next, we break down the individual components of POE. So first, we have CPOE. CPOE stands for created points over expectation. This is just the offensive component of POE. So this just looks at how many shots did a team take or did a player take, what types of shots were they, what is the expected return on those shots, and what did the team actually get, and then what is the difference between what was expected and what the actual return was. So CPOE is pure offense. You can see on Nevada, for example, the vast majority of their 9.42 POE came from offense, as their CPOE is 9.09. For CPOE, you want positive numbers. For actual POE, you want positive numbers as well. San Diego State, on the other hand, had a little less than half of their POE come from their CPOE. That might be around 40%. I'm not doing the math in my head. That's just a guess, but somewhere around there, 40% or so came from the offense. The next is the DPOE, which stands for defensive points over expectation. What this does is it takes a player or a team's defensive possessions, the amount of them, the types that the offense they were guarding was using, and the expected return on those possessions. So if you're guarding somebody and they shoot a shot that's supposed to get them 1.5 points per possession and they miss, then you just saved 1.5 points. For defensive points over expectation, you actually want a negative number. Negative numbers are good. And you can see from this, San Diego State actually had the best defensive points over expectation right here at negative 2.84. For all these numbers, whether it's CPOE, DPOE, or normal POE, or even the season numbers, so if there's a little S in front of it, that's for the whole season once again. For all these, 0 is average. So according to this, San Diego State had a pretty good defense last year overall, whereas Nevada's defense was just a tiny bit better than average. New Mexico's defense was a tiny bit below average, which actually is surprising to me based off of their coach and the way they play and all that stuff. But the numbers don't lie. And then next to those, we have the season created points over expectation as well as the season defensive points over expectation. So these work the same way as the SPOE works. This is the sheet that you should be using the most, and this is the one that I will be posting on Twitter and stuff the most. But just in case you want to know exactly how these numbers are calculated, we will look at that next. Here I have the CPOE chart. Once again, on the left you have all the teams. Coming through, we have the amount of games they played, the amount of possessions they used over the course of the season, the amount of possessions they used per game over the course of the season. The real meaty stuff is a little bit further down. Here we have the CPOE, so that just gets transferred over to the next sheet. We have their expected points per game right here. So this takes how many shots do they take, what types of shots are they in each game, and then this is how many points a team is supposed to score. This number is their actual points per game. So this is the actual average. If you look up the number on like Basketball Reference or whatever, this is the number that they would show you. This little triangle here, that's a delta sign, and that is just a symbol for change or difference, something like that. So this is the difference between the two numbers. For this one, you want a positive number because you want to score more points than an average team would. Same thing, right next to it, you have expected points per possession, actual points per possession, and then the points per possession delta. So once again, you'd want a positive number here. You can see Nevada has the highest out of all of them on the offensive side anyways. How this actually gets calculated is you take the number of possessions that were used, and these are the different types of possessions. So you have pick and roll ball handler, isolation, spot up, off screen, transition, handoff, pick and roll, roll man, cuts, putbacks, post ups, and miscellaneous. I'm not going to go into exactly what all of these possessions are. Most of them should be pretty self-explanatory. A couple of them have specific definitions that Synergy uses to make their algorithms work a little bit better. But first thing we do is we count the number of possessions for each of these things that a team uses. Next, we put that in a simple formula, and we get how many points a team should score given that many of those types of possessions. So that's what all this stuff is. All the possessions are exactly the same. These are how many points that team should have scored with the amount of possessions that they had. The next thing we look at is how many points they actually scored in real life. So that's what all this is. And then finally, you get the CPOE for each individual play type. This could be kind of useful to see if a team should be using a specific play type more than they are. But overall, it's just a lot of data to go through. If somebody wants to, you're absolutely able to. This isn't going to be locked away or anything. But it can just be a lot of information to decipher. Once all these numbers are put in, you just add all of them up and take the sum of all of them, and it creates the season points over expectation number. That is way back here at the beginning where we started, and then you take this number and divide it by how many games the team played, and it'll give you the CPOE. So that is how that is calculated. DPOE is calculated basically the same exact way, just it's for defense instead. Because of that, you want the POE number to be negative because you want the team you're playing to score less points than they're expected to. But other than that, I believe everything is the same. The process is exactly the same. You put in all the number of possessions, you put in the points that the other team is expected to get, you put in the actual points you gave up, and then you have the difference between the two right here. Add them all up, divide by how many games the team played, you get the season defensive points over expectation. You put those all into here, and it gives you the overall POE for a team. That does it for this one, Aztec fans. If you'd like to support the work that I do, or if you'd like to join the movement for more thoughtful, quality, localized sports coverage, please click on the Patreon link in the description.